Hey, it's Carly.
Hey, it's Shamina.
And
And
we're emotional.
welcome back. Oh wait, am I doing it or are you doing
It
it?
does not matter.
I'll do it. Okay.
Go
So
ahead.
today we are talking about how social media influences romantic relationships. We're super excited to get into this topic, so that will be on the agenda for today.
Welcome back. This is our second episode of our four-episode return mini-series. Before we get started, if you haven't already, check out our socials. IG, we are at Emotionful Pod, and Facebook, we are at Emotionful Podcast. And then YouTube, we're Emotionful Podcast.
Like, subscribe, do all of the things, follow us on all of those, share it with your friends. We're super excited
Yeah,
to be back.
check us out. So yeah, as we mentioned, today we're gonna touch on the what the presence of social media can do, or at least our experience of what it's done influenced in our relationships. Do you want to take it off?
Um, why don't you start? Because this was like something that you felt was super important and has impacted your presence on social media.
Yeah, so I actually am not on social media anymore. Um, Partly because of that, because I think I go down the rabbit hole and then I'm working on not comparing myself. And so I think when I would go on social media and see these videos, and I would see a lot of videos of women talking about the relationship after the toxic or unhealthy or abusive one, and it just seemed so easy, or just so natural flowing, or just happened. And it really made me be like, why am I because I have the hesitation, I feel like I'm with me in this relationship, I really am still learning to trust myself and the decisions I make, and things like that. And so I think I would see these videos and I'd be like, what's wrong with me? Like, why can't I just jump back in and be like, oh, the past is the past, and let it go, let it go. But it got to a point to where I was like, okay, because also the algorithm of social media is you like one video about a relationship and then your whole feed is relationship videos. So I think it just got to where it was just making me I don't want to say making me feel bad, but I guess it was, in a sense. That definitely, it was making me feel why can't I just not let what I went through phase me to the extent that it is, and and, and just let it be, let it go. And so yeah, so I said for my 30th birthday, that was what I gave up all social media. Um and I mean, I wasn't really on Facebook for a couple years prior, but really Instagram and Snapchat, which, yeah. So that's, I don't know, I just I really have been good. I haven't been on it. I mean, I did go on if I need to communicate with someone who I don't have their phone number, I'll go on, because I know, Shamina, you the other day you're like, "Are you back?" And I was like, "No, I'm just trying to get a hold of somebody who I don't have their phone number." Um, so it's not like I'm like, I can't even look at it. I do have some self-control and things like that. It's just I didn't want to, because even when I was on social media, probably the past 2 or 3 years, I have a limit. I have a timer on my phone of 30 minutes, whatever I felt during that phase of my life that I wanted, just because I could get sucked in, and then I'm like, and then and then it's that whole between of like, I don't want to just be a on social media all day scrolling, like I want to go. And so I think it's partially the videos I was watching, but also like it's for me to try to learn to be like, okay, like leave my phone in one room and go and do something and not feel like, oh, I gotta, check what's going on or whatever.
Well, I think we all know that like social media distorts our versions of reality in general, but I think when it comes to relationships, like all everybody ever posts is like happy ass
Mm.
shit. Like, oh my God, look at us. We're so in love. We're traveling. We're doing this. We're doing that. And I know that like in previous relationships, I've used social media to like portray a certain image of me and my partner, where I'm like, I'm feeling really like shitty about our relationship, but like, oh, we're doing something. Let me post this nice picture, and so everybody will think that we're happy and it's amazing and wonderful. And I think it creates more like distance and disconnection for people who may be struggling because we don't like normalize the difficulty in relationships. Or I can think of like one couple in particular that like I see when they post on social media, and if I didn't know who they were in real life, I would be like, "Oh my God, I have these like preconceived notions and conceptions about them." And then like I meet with them in person. I'm like, you're nothing like how I thought that you were just based off of the things that you post.
I definitely agree with that, and I agree with that even outside of just relationships, but in general, like you made a really good point of people only post the good things or the things they want you to know about them, and unfortunately, I feel like our generation is like like social media became big like when we were in high school. So I feel like yes, we like social media, but I mean, don't get me wrong, there are people addicted to it, but we knew what it was like before it. You know what I mean? So it's almost like I think for me that's why I'm not so into it of like, but I think the younger generation, they grew up in social media, like that's all that they know. Like they have jobs doing social media, and I think that's great, but I also think like you said, you have to find that balance of like reminding yourself that people only post what they want you to, like you said, perceive about themselves. So that was another thing too of like, if you're struggling and then you go on social media and you see people traveling or a anniversary picture of people and you're like, oh, they're just so happy, but it's like you said, but really are they, or are they just wanting you to think that, but really they're going through a rough patch. And so I've never been one to display too much on social media, like but for me it was just the scrolling. Like I would compare. I would say that's one thing that it was really hard for me because I would just compare and be like, what's wrong with me? Like, like that was my initial thought process, is something's wrong with me, instead of like um thinking of external factors. I always am like, no. And so I just um social media can be good. Obviously, I think what we do, we're going to be putting it on social medias and stuff, but it's finding that balance. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, that's like most of our exposure to the outside world is
Hmm.
like through social media. And so if it's filtered through this lens of like positivity or these wonderful romantic relationships, or like, I'm on this healing journey after being in an unhealthy relationship, like again, we're still seeing just like more of the positive sides. We're not necessarily seeing people who like are getting triggered in a new relationship. Or um I saw this one post actually, and I thought it was really great, of how like this girlfriend was checking in with her new partner of like, my anxiety is trying to tell me X, Y, or Z. Like I'm just trying to like check in with you, and I need you to tell me that like this isn't real and I'm just kind of creating this story. And the guy was like, yeah, no, like you're good. And I loved that because that's something that I do with my current partner all the time, is I'm like, right now, my anxiety and my intrusive thoughts are telling me X, Y, and Z about our relationship. Like, I need you to fact check me. I need you to tell me that, like, it's all in my head. I'm making this stuff up. And he's like, it's all in your head. You're making this stuff up. But, like, we don't see kind of more of the nitty gritty stuff. And it's just more of like people working out or journaling or meditating or going to therapy. But it's not like the emotional process of like trying to heal.
Yes, and I also think because you when you said that it reminded me of some videos of like I would see videos of, people healing or whatever, but that was another thing of like they're saying if you do this, 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 it'll lead to this. And I feel like that really irked me because it was like that might work for you, but that doesn't mean that that's going to work for everyone. And so some people like me, again, I couldn't decipher this, but some people like me who might see your videos and then try it and it doesn't work for them, that could make them feel worse. And again, it's social media. So like I think it's the user's responsibility to filter that, but again, going back to kids who are super young and do they have that mindfulness to do that? Because for me, when I would see those videos and it would, I would think about it and I'd be like, okay, like I can acknowledge that that process isn't going to work for everyone and that's okay, but some people might not. And then obviously again, I was able to then take on that accountability of like, hey, I'm going to take a break from social media because I am seeing that like watching these videos are making me sometimes feel bad of like the way that I'm navigating my relationship after an unhealthy one is like, am I doing something wrong or whatever it may be. But I also think that like sometimes, and like the one that you said, like that doesn't seem like that would have bothered me because I'll do like, I literally called my partner a couple weeks ago and I was like, can you tell me why you love me? Because right now I just, like you said, like my brain is telling me that. And, but yeah, like, I would get kind of irked by sometimes because 'cause I'd be like, "Oh," like and again, I know that the people putting those videos out, I would assume that their intention is not like, "Oh, this is the key," but sometimes people think that, like, I do think that sometimes people are like, "Oh, if you do X, Y, and Z, you'll get this result," and sometimes I'm like, "That's just because it worked for you doesn't mean that that will work for everybody. And there are some people on here who might not realize that and then get upset with themselves or be even harder on themselves and whatever. I don't know. I'm at a point right now where I'm like, I wish, like I miss the days without social media of like no one knew. I'm realizing, like I saw this quote a while ago, but I saw it again recently of like my phone is for my convenience, not yours. So like if you call or text me, I don't have to respond immediately. It's for my convenience of like, I will get to you when I can. You know what I mean? And like, I know, and it was like a discussion of like, back in the day when cell phones weren't around and you called someone and you had to leave a voicemail, if they were out all day, it could be potentially 12 hours before you got a call back. But I think nowadays we want a response so quickly and immediately, and I know I can be like that too. I'm not saying I'm not, but I think that's another reason why I'm trying to like slowly, like I said, like kind of leave my phone in another room and wait a little bit before, because I can be like, I know I can be like that of like if I call my mom and I'm like, why didn't she answer me? What is she's not doing anything, but it's like again, it's reminding myself that like the phone is like our phones are for our convenience, not like for the person on the other end to like just get us in a snap. Obviously, like situational circumstances, but that's been something of because there was a time too where I was like, if someone called me, I felt obligated to answer, and then I just was like draining myself, and I was like, I can't do these phone calls all day.
I think something else that came up for me as you were talking is when I was in the relationship and dealing with the gaslighting, the manipulation, all of those kinds of things. I would be on my phone a lot more as like a way to avoid or distract. And I
Mhm.
can remember a lot of times thinking like, are other people experiencing this too?
Mhm.
And if I would find something that like related to it, I was like, okay, like I'm not alone. Like I'm not crazy. I'm not the problem. Like this is actually happening to other people. And being a therapist, like I get to hear that all the time from other people. But then me, I have to go to my therapist to be like, is this normal? Do other people do this too? Or I find it through social media. And so sometimes like that can feel really lonely of like, am I by myself in this, or is this something that other people experience? So I think sometimes my work with my clients actually helps to validate my own life because they're coming to me and they're like, this is happening, or I'm experiencing this. And I'm like, okay, like other people, yeah, this is real. Okay, cool.
100%. I'm smiling because it brings up a memory. Two memories. One, the phone thing. I was the exact same way. To the point to where my therapist was even like, "Yeah, you use your phone as a way to like kind of disconnect from what you're going through." And I've noticed lately, I'm like, "Oh, I don't need to be on my phone as much." And I'm like, "Oh, it's because like I enjoy my life." Um, but I was smiling because right? But I was smiling because I feel like that statement that you made of like, am I alone in this is like so, at least for me, resonates so hard because I was literally having dinner with some friends a couple weeks ago and I was talking to them and I was like, that's probably the biggest thing for me is I think I was made to feel like I was, like you said, crazy or the only one going through this. And so like with intrusive thoughts, I would like really struggle with them. And I told them and then they're like, "Yeah, girl, we think that too." You know, it's like it's normal to think crazy shit. It's like, but you don't really think it. You know, like I'm gonna give an example and it's gonna be crazy, but like, you know, like you put your hand down the garbage disposal. It's like, would I ever actually do that? Hell no. But you know, if it crossed my mind when I'm doing the dishes, I'm like, hmm. And so my friends were like, yeah, you know, like, have you ever been driving to traffic? You're like, what if I, and I'm like, okay, so it's so normal, but like, it sounds crazy, but like how refreshing it is to hear of like someone else. And I'm like, oh, okay, so like a lot of people have this and like you said, it's just so refreshing to be like, "Oh, you think that way too? Okay." So like that, like I think that's something that I'm really learning of, like I think my younger self, like I knew it, I never questioned it. But then after everything I went through, now I'm like I'm questioning those thoughts sometimes of like, "Oh my gosh, why do I think that?" But then I'm like, "No, that's kind of like normal, you know? Like people think that. It's just then it pops out of their head, whereas for me, because I don't realize that other people think it, I then, like, think about it even more because I'm like, "Why am I thinking that?" You know? So
And like I can just imagine the loneliness that people like if I wasn't a therapist and I couldn't hear like other people's stories or didn't know that like other stuff was going on because I'm the type of person that like I usually keep things more to myself unless it's like really bothering me. I'm like even when we're in a group setting like yeah, I'll kind of talk about things, but I'm not as open as you are about like things that are going on in your life or like what's happening. And so like if I didn't have any of those like outlets or do what I do for my job, like it would be so much more isolating and so much more lonely because I'd have no fucking clue of like, yeah, this is normal or like, yeah, other people experience this or I can't tell you how many times I like look at my therapist and I like shrink down. I'm like, is this normal? Is this what other people do? And she's like, yeah, Shmina, like it is. And I'm like, are you sure? And she's like, yep.
well, I think it's wild that you are like I mean, it's great that you being a therapist, like, helps you, but I think it's wild to me because I think if I was a therapist, it would probably just stress me out. I could never. I mean, you know, I've been saying this for, like, 4 plus years. I could never, ever, ever, because I'd probably be the one that end up crying during the session with all of my clients. But maybe that's why I'm more like vocal about what I'm going through because, I mean, I have like my mom and stuff I talk to and everything, um, but I really think that like just when I went through the breakup, it made me realize that like it's okay to be vulnerable and like vulnerability is like strength and like sharing what you go through and like people want to help, like me and you have talked about this like years ago about like, oh, you just don't want to be a burden, like I think you've said it, I'm sure I've said it. And I saw a quote somewhere that was like, people want to help, like that's in our nature. Like obviously it gets to a point to where like you might get overwhelmed or burnt out, but that's finding that balance of filling your cup while also filling others. But at the end of the day, I think human nature is we want to help. We want to do good. We want to help people. Um, but I mean, yeah, I think I'm pretty vocal for the most part. But yeah, but I also cry the moment I share any of my feelings. So
Learning how to regulate them. It's fine. You got a lot of them in that tiny little body of yours.
I do. I really do. But I'm learning to appreciate them, They're good. Emotions are good. I'm just like I'm finding that balance. I think for so long I had to shut so many emotions off that now I'm like free flow and they really flowing, man.
Yeah. No, I get that. Um, so I had a thought come up while you were talking about how not only do we not see like negative things on social media about unhealthy relationships, but how oftentimes it can be minimized or like really downplayed about the severity of like what's happening or
Like it's not a big
um
deal or like
yeah.
I'm sorry not to cut you off, but it just triggered when we were doing Emotionful before and we were interviewing your coworker, supervisor, and we were talking about that whole saying of like put your bootstraps on and it just made me think of that.
Pick yourself up by your bootstraps,
Thank
yeah.
you. You knew what I was going. But yeah, like it's kind of like, yeah. Yeah. Go
Yeah.
ahead though. I cut you off.
Um, where was I going with that? Oh, so I'm gonna go there because I have a platform to do this. I've been talking about this for a week straight. For anybody who has heard about the movie It Ends With Us, it has recently come out. It has been a book. Um, as a therapist, as a child of domestic violence, that's what I call myself, is like I witnessed domestic violence between my mom and my stepdad when I was growing up. And then being in an abusive relationship, I had so much hope
Mhm.
for this movie to really normalize domestic violence. Also, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it or you don't know what it's about, spoiler alert, it's about domestic violence. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So if you want to skip it, skip it. Um, but so I had so much hope for this movie of like, they have a kind of like star-studded cast here that they have so much influence, like they can do so much with this, like so much advocacy, being able to normalize, all of these things. So I watched the movie and I was like super disappointed and let down. And everybody's got like mixed reviews. So let me just preface all of this with like, this is my opinion. If you feel differently, if you really liked the movie, if you enjoyed it, I think that's fantastic. Good for you. But I did not. Um, and I think the biggest letdown has just been like the minimization of the abuse that was displayed like in the movie, because the whole movie is about like somebody who is in a domestic violence relationship and chooses to get out, chooses to end the cycle. She
Mhm.
also experiences like witnessing abuse from her parents in childhood.
Mhm.
And I see the premise of like they seem to kind of try and like um I don't want to say minimize, but I guess minimize. Like sometimes like when things happen to us like in relationships we're like, was it that bad? Did I actually think of it that way? Like is this what's going on? Like I used to feel like that with the gaslighting all the time. I'd go to my therapist and I'd be like, this is what blah 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 blah. And she's like, Shamina, you're being gaslit. And
Mhm.
I was like, no, that's not happening. And then I remember where I was, I remember what I was doing, but I was getting yelled at by my partner and he said something and it immediately like I had the awareness. I was like, "Holy shit. This motherfucker is gaslighting me right in this moment." And I was able to like catch it. So anyway, I digress. I see where they were going with the movie of like being able to kind of like show how, we can disconnect from like really emotional or traumatic experiences or minimize it or think it's not that bad. But it just felt like a disservice that
That was the
th-
focus or something?
that is the focus and like those things did happen or like there are certain scenes where like the violence kind of occurs and then it like fades to black and it stops. And
Mhm.
it's like I don't think it needs to be super graphic and like really triggering for people, but I just felt like it could have been more, I don't know, like realistic.
Mhm.
This is what actually happens, or there's even like a kind of like violent scene and she just has again, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the movie, pause now and fast forward when we get done with this, but like she falls downstairs and she has a
Like
teeny tiny scratch on her head. That's it.
falls downstairs?
Yes, quote unquote, falls downstairs and then, she gets all cleaned up and it's this little scratch on her head.
Mm.
And I'm like, if you fell downstairs, I don't think it would just be, you know what I mean? So I just felt like it wasn't as realistic or like the emotion wasn't there as much. And I felt really let down that even the way that it's being promoted, obviously there's so much going on in the media right now with that, but I've had conversations with friends is like that's what's being highlighted right now is
Mhm.
like the feud between cast members potentially and not like here are resources for domestic violence or this is an important topic that we need to be discussing. And so I feel like the whole premise of the movie is getting um swept under the rug by all of this other like social media feuding nonsense.
So I have not seen the movie. I don't know if I will because as we previously discussed, I don't know if it's a Carly movie. However, I was going to speak on a little bit of I heard that like the feud between the cast members at least is because like Blake Lively is kind of downplaying, I guess, but I from what I've seen in articles is like Justin Baldoni is really focusing on the domestic violence
Yeah.
aspect of it and like he's like the only one and I will say I love him like even prior to this I feel like he really stays true to his morals and he's really big on like mental health and I think he even has a book about like boys and what they go through emotionally because that really doesn't get talked about enough. So I really like what he stands for. Um but I've not seen it, but I do feel like sometimes things like that get downplayed because what happens when you have that real conversation of like the reality of the amount of people that experience domestic violence, like um I think sometimes, it's like that thing of like that's what you talk about behind closed doors or like we don't talk about that and things like that. But I think we need to start talking about it because more people than you realize experience it, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, financial abuse. I don't think people realize the amount of the different types of abuse. I remember when I was in grad school, and I was in I can't remember what class it was, but we had gotten a sheet of like all of the different types. Do you remember that? And of all the different types of abuse. And I remember I don't know if like seeing that sheet was like maybe like a reality moment for me of like I think I'm experiencing some of this, but I still wasn't at that point to like but I remember like talking to my ex at the time about it and like kind of saying something and um like jokingly about it, you know, but I always say like the person like it's so hard because I think I didn't even like how you said like is it really that bad or things like that, and I think when I left I didn't even realize like my therapist was like, Carly, like you were emotionally abused, you know, and like mentally, like, and like the reality of that was like, whoa, like, you know, like it's like, no, it's just, we just weren't good or whatever. And I do think we downplay it to kind of like, because sometimes for me at least, it's like I couldn't believe that I could let that happen to me. Does that make sense?
But yeah, it's a coping skill.
Yeah.
Like, because then, like, if we accept fully and acknowledge like what is happening, then we have to deal with all of the emotions that come with that. And
Mm-hmm.
so, like even me and my current partner, we talked recently, like this week, about, things that like the dynamic between my ex and I, and he was like, why did you stay for so long? And I think a huge part of that is like the denial piece, or like the minimization of like, it's not that bad, or like, I can deal with this, or like, I just need to, again, for me, my whole theme was like, I was the problem. So like, I'm going to therapy. Let me fix this. Let me work on this. Like, I
Because
got to
of
be
what you went
better.
through in your childhood? Do you think like that, or like why do you think that you were the problem?
I think that's been a huge core belief of mine, is like it has to be me.
Mm.
And I'm sure that like my childhood has something to do with that, but that was also what my ex was telling me.
Mhm.
And so it was like, your emotions are the problem. You got to figure this out. He used to tell me like, you can't make a decision about your life unless you talk to your therapist about it. Or like, why do you need to talk to your therapist about these things? Like, figure it out on your own. You talk to too many people about this stuff. Or
Mhm.
you need to try to do X, Y, or Z, and then things will be better. If you do this, then this will happen. And so, not only like do I have some of these beliefs about myself that like I need to do better, or it is me, I am the problem, but then I'm actually being told this by
Right.
somebody else. And so, I don't remember what I was talking about before any of this, before you asked that question.
You're
So, I don't
you
know
were
where I was
talking
going.
about because I like you and your current partner, you he asked you
Oh,
why
right, right,
you
right.
stayed for so long.
Right, right. So I think the denial piece, but also the minimization, and then like, I can fix this.
Mhm.
If I just do something different, if I try this, if I try that, then things will get better. And again, I think that was what the movie was trying to show, is like it wasn't that bad, or the way that she remembered it wasn't what, she actually thought, those types of things. But I think we do that so much as a coping skill,
Mhm.
because again, when I finally recognized to myself that like this was happening to me, I would still go to therapy and like check in with my therapist of like, are you sure it's not me? Like, there's nothing else that I need to be doing. And she's like, no, Shamina, like, this is emotional abuse. You're being gaslit. This is and I can't tell you how many times she had to tell me that, because then I'd go back home, still be in the relationship and kind of be convinced of like something else, and then go back to therapy, and she's like, this is real.
Mhm.
This is happening. And I was just kind of at war with myself the whole time.
It's so like so a couple things popped up for me while you were talking. One, I think for me, I didn't want to admit that I was like I don't want to say a victim, but like that you know like you know it's kind of like that would never happen to me. I would never let someone, but it happens and it happens and you don't even realize it. And then all of a sudden you're in the middle of it and you're like what is going on? I think that was one. I would make excuses for him. I think that was another reason why I stayed was I would make excuses for him when he wasn't even making excuses for himself, and that was something I said I will never ever 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 do it. I will never make an excuse for a person that's not even using that excuse for themselves because I'd always be like, "Oh, he had it rough growing up or something." And so and but he wasn't even saying those things. So why am I over here making excuses as to why it won't work? when he's not, you know? And that was one thing that my therapist would tell me when I started dating after was like, if you meet someone, look at who they are today and can you be with that person, not their potential, because they may never become their potential. And and that I think correlates with me of like I used to make excuses for him of like, oh, it'll be better when this happens, or he's struggling because of what he went through in this, but he would never even tell me those things. I would just say it because I needed something to, I guess, think why would he do or say or treat me this way. And so like that was like my own coping of like that's why he's treating me this way. And
But
two
I
more.
can't like go ahead, because you'll forget.
Yeah, I will forget. um with the gaslighting, I feel like I experienced that a lot to where like even now I'm very, very like sensitive to words and how you say it. And like I have to remind myself that like that it's not like to the because obviously we're humans, we all make mistakes, we all might say things a certain way that we don't mean, but like that's one thing that like I try to find that balance of like one, not taking everything too seriously, but two, if it was something that was said that I really don't like, speaking up and being like, "Hey, I don't appreciate that." But finding that balance because, I'm sure I say things. And then I can remember like I would, like you said, kind of say like, "Oh, things will get better" or whatever. And do you know this Mary Morris, the song it um it's like when if the
The bone.
bones I can't think of how it goes, but I would listen to that song and then I'd be like, it's not that bad. Like I would have to like hype myself up if I would get like really like the reality of what it was. I would have to hype myself up and be like, no, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. Like I would be like, this is just a rough patch or something. But I'm like, it's been a 6 year rough patch, like, but yeah, it's crazy, now that we're like talking about that anyway. And so, I know this whole episode was about social media. We kind of have gone all over the place, but, I think it does matter what we put out on social media, and I think we're starting to get to where people are putting more of like the reality and like real life things, but I just wish it was more, more so. I say that, but obviously I'm not even on social media because whatever. But yeah, just social media is very, very influential, whether it's good or bad.
And I think it makes it easier for us to hide because, again, like to your point of like, I didn't want to accept that like I was in an abusive relationship or like that could happen to me
Hmm.
because I watched that growing up and I
Yeah.
was like, no, absolutely not. I will never do this. And I can remember my ex would do certain things that my stepdad used to do when I was younger. And I'd get flashbacks of
Mm.
like when I was a kid and I'd be like, holy shit, like this is actually happening, like this is real. And I think because of social media and just the stigma of like being in an unhealthy or abusive relationship, like you don't want to tell people or you
Mhm.
may not want to put it out there because everybody else is posting like really positive content, and so it creates more of like a disconnect or nobody knows, like
Mhm.
nobody has to know what's actually going on in your life, like I'll talk to people um who may have not known like the inner workings of my last relationship, and they're like, why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you reach out? Like why didn't you do X, Y, or Z? And it's like it was hard enough to be in the relationship and then, choosing to leave and everything else that came with that. But I think just with how much we can put on a different image to social media, again, that can contribute to us like being in denial or minimizing that, like it's not that bad. Or you look back at the photos
Mhm.
and you see like the happy photos and then you post that. Or I can remember I was just recently looking at my photos and there's one, and I thought 5 minutes before I took this photo, we got into a huge fight and I was bawling my eyes out. But I
Mm.
liked the way that the sun hit my eye and it made it like really like golden brown, and so I wanted to take a picture of that. And that's what I posted on social media.
Was the picture of just you? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Oh, maybe it might have been the other person,
yeah.
but I don't have that anymore. I just have like
The
I think we took a photo together, and I don't remember if I posted that or not. Um, Maybe I did both. I don't remember, but I don't have the photo of the other person now, so I
mhm.
just remember like the solo photo.
Well, and how you had said like people were like, why didn't you say anything? I think for me, I think it got to a point to where I didn't want to hear what people had to say because when I would vent to them, which now I'm like, okay, I really take what my friends and family say, like I really, but in my last relationship, I didn't. And so when I would like vent to them or like tell them what was going on and they would voice their like frustration or annoyance or dislike, and I didn't want to hear that. I wasn't ready to hear that. I wasn't ready to hear that opinion of them. So then it got to a point where I just stopped telling my friends because I knew they didn't like him. Like if I'm being honest, I don't think a single one of my friends liked my ex. Like I genuinely don't think one person liked him. Like, they put on face for me, obviously, but I don't think anyone genuinely liked him. And like even my family, and it's crazy because like I think I've told you this before, but after we broke up, my mom was telling me how her and my dad were concerned for me. Like mostly because of like they were like you were paying for everything, like my dad was like concerned like financially wise, but I'm sure they had other concerns too, but I thought it was crazy. And I think I had asked my mom like why didn't you say anything? And she was like because that's your decision to make, but I think that's where you find that, now I'm very like a week after me and my boyfriend became official, I was like, you have to meet my family because I need to know how my family feels about, like, so I'm just like, no, like, it's, yeah. So now I'm like, what do you think? And it's almost like because I'm still learning to trust, obviously that I'm, yeah, not there now, but in the very beginning, I'd be like, what do you think? Like almost like a test.
We almost have to like reality check.
Mhm.
Like, are you seeing what I'm also seeing? Because I do think that coming out of an unhealthy relationship into a new one, there is a lot of mistrust of,
Mhm.
am I missing the red flags? Am I perceiving something that somebody else sees it differently? And so being able to really kind of like get that outside perspective or a more objective perspective. Like I can remember I used to say all the time, like, is this real? Like
Mhm.
there's no way that like somebody could be like this nice or this genuine or actually just care like when's the other shoe gonna drop, like what's gonna happen type of thing. And so we have to just, so I get it, like reality checking of, what do you think? How are you perceiving their behavior? Like making sure you're not missing something, that kind of stuff.
I have had that conversation with my therapist. She's like, "Carly, you have to stop waiting for this other shoe to drop." And I'm like, "I don't know how." Like, especially in the very beginning, because I'm like, he's just so great. Like, even now, I don't I don't really have like that too much for the most part. Like, obviously, I have my days. But I just will look at him and just smile, and he'll be like, "Why are you staring?" And I'm like and I really don't think he'll ever fully understand, like, the admiration of, like just, like I'm like, I don't think I could ever put into words just how thankful and grateful I am for you of, like because one thing that I'm still working on actively is I in my past relationship, I was pretty much to the point to where like I'm not worthy, you know? So then I look at this like angelic man and I'm like, like to me, like and I'm sure I praise him and I'm sure he probably doesn't like that I put him on such a high pedestal, but like from what I experienced to this, like I'm like, you're just so kind, And like I love being around him and like the fact that he likes being around me, like I've never had that before, so, like, it makes me wanna tear up just now because it's like, we deserve that, you know, and it shouldn't feel weird that someone enjoys our presence, like our romantic partner, but the fact that, like, that's something that we have to get used to, like, it hurts me, you know, like, it hurts that I even have to say that, like, I'm not used to you being that like, I'm not used to my partner being nice to me or, like, wanting to be around me or, like, love me, and so when he does, I'm just like, I just, like, melt, and I'm just like, "Ugh, like, you're just so amazing," and, like, he's just like, it's normal for him, you know, like and, like, we were talking about something, and he was just like, "I would never yell at you." Or we were watching a show, and it was, like, a couple, and they got into, like, a heated argument or whatever, and he was like, "How could someone talk to the person they love like that?" And when he said that, I was like I'm like, "You have no idea, my love." But, like, I was just like that, you know, like, the fact that that's, you know, he's just very kind-hearted, and I know I'm, like, mushing all over him, but it's just because, like, I never thought that I would get this or that I deserved it, and I'm still reminding myself that, like, I am worthy and deserving of a mutual love, you know, of, like yeah. It's just sometimes, like you said, like, like, this is real, like, I'm like, "Wow," like, yeah, like, it's just very, refreshing. I feel like that's my word of the podcast, you know, because like, I've said that a million times, but eye-opening, enlightening, I don't know, like, it's just, it's really great, but I'm still getting used to it. I'm still getting used to, like, this goodness, you know?
Shout out to the patient, kind, caring men who love all parts of women who are trying to heal after past relationships because y'all are the real MVPs. I feel very similarly to my partner. And, there are days where I'm like, why?
Mhm.
I don't even want to put up with me. Why do you put up with me? And I just like that type of unconditional love is I don't even know the word.
Isn't
Like what
it
I read about in
great
books.
when,
Love
like,
for
we can
sure.
only say good things about our partner? Like,
I know.
I really feel like I can't say like, I told him the other day, I'm like, "You can annoy the shit out of me, but I never get tired of him." Like, I don't think I'll ever get tired of him, but, like, he does annoy me sometimes, but, like, I don't think I could ever talk bad about him, you know? Like, obviously, I'm sure, you know, we have our issues or, you
On another day, we'll have a different episode for you, but
yeah, you know, of course, everyone has their disagreements and things like that,
right.
but I think, like, what you said of, like, patience, that's a huge, like, you know, communication and just, like, working through it of just knowing that that person is as dedicated as you are, that, like, even if we go through something, we're gonna figure it out, and we're gonna figure it out together. But, yeah, all of
This
this
episode for you. You meant
yeah, I know, right?
listen.
Well, all of this for our social media, but you know, maybe we'll have to make like, a video of something, you know, like a short little, like, TikTok or something, but
So, again, just to kind of wrap up, social media has a huge influence on relationships. Again, as Carly and I have said, we think that it's starting to become more normalized and talked about. There are still things, even today, going on in the media world that affect, relationships.
I know we're wrapping up, and I'm kind of annoyed with myself that this thought just popped into my head at the end of our episode. But social media, I think, along with like movies and things like that, and I'm just going to speak. I wish I could go on more, but I won't. I won't. Also, there was a time where I could not watch like romance movies because it would irritate the shit out of me because I'd be like, that's not real life. That never happened. You know, like that, like especially like the Hallmark ones, like even to this day, sometimes it irks me because I'm like, okay, you guys were on a vacation for 3 days together and now you're in love and propose. Like, get the hell out of here. Like, that's not real. Um, and I don't know why the thought just popped into my head instead of 20 minutes ago. But social media, I think, but also, the movies we watch, that really plays into what we expect. And I think sometimes when we do watch these constant, like, unrealistic like, don't get me wrong, we all deserve that, but like some of these are so unrealistic with the romance that it's like it almost does us a disservice, because now that's what we're expecting, and I'm sorry, but that's just not real. Like, yes, like you said, we should have a partner that's like kind and patient and good communication, but they're not going to propose to you in 3 days. They're not going to tie your just whatever it is. Like, some of these I'm just like, they're getting carried, or I'm just like, they put these false ideas into our heads, and I'll say I was a victim of it, of like thinking like that's, and so I think it got to a point where I was like, I can't even watch these freaking movies. Like, don't get me wrong, I still like me a good rom-com and everything, but like sometimes those Hallmark ones, they're just a little too cheesy now for me. I used to love watching them, and now I'm just like, can't.
Yeah, I agree.
So
I agree. As soon as you were like, "Oh my God, I know we're wrapping up," my immediate reaction wanted to be like, "Okay, let me know what you wanted to say. I'll make a note of it and we'll pick up next session," because that's what my clients do. And I was like, "No, no, no. We're not in therapist mode right now. We don't say that."
I know, but I'm like, why couldn't I have had this thought, whatever, because we could have dove into that, um but I,
Next episode, we can touch on it a
yeah,
smidgen.
yeah, exactly.
So
So,
stay tuned. We got 2 more episodes in this mini series. We hope you like what we're putting out.
yeah, leave us some feedback. Let us know.
That sounded bad. We hope you like the content that we are
We're
creating
putting
for you.
out. Yeah,
Yeah.
but also give us your feedback, whether it's a comment, DM, share, like, let us know. I know we've been gone for a while, but we're back for now. So share the love, or spread the love. Yes. Toodaloo for now.
Bye.
Bye. I just wanted to wait a second before I stop.